Welcome to The Roadmap. We are your hosts, Gogo.
I'm Coach.
And we're here to have real conversations with people whose successes you may know, but whose stories you probably don't.
We're connecting with the mentor, the founder, the artist, and the builder to uncover the personal journeys that they have taken.
No business roadmaps, no project roadmaps. This is the roadmap of your life, and we're here to explore it with you. Hey, welcome to another episode of The Roadmap. I am your first host, Gogo. We're here with my fellow host, Coach, aka Steve, and we're here with our amazing guest, Aaron. He is biz dev with DGods, one of our favorite projects in the ecosystem, but we're here to talk about his personal life story. Aaron, you've been a great friend of ours, and we're here to just ask you how you are today. Where are you today? How are you?
I'm doing great. I can't complain on a nice Friday, TGIF, but I'm currently based in Oklahoma. I think I might be one of the only people in crypto Twitter that claims that, at least. But yeah, I'm in Oklahoma. Like you said, work for Dust Labs, involved in DGods and Utes, and I just kind of work remotely. Although I was kidnapped for a couple months there towards the end of the summer to help with Utes.
Kidnapped. I mean, it's funny. I mean, again, I'm surprised I'm not surprised that you got kidnapped from Oklahoma. It's kind of funny that like you're like, oh yeah, please take me.
Maybe I got rescued. I don't know. There's one thing. There's something in there. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, right now, I think it's NFT Paris, and I think I saw, based on our recording, and I saw Frank and some of you didn't get to go with them?
No. So that was most of the D Labs guys went. So Frank, Finn, Candy Apple, and Johnny are all there right now. I think actually like the party maybe just started as we started filming this. So should be some fun pictures. And
the Rug Radio one?
No, our party. We have an event on a boat with pudgy penguins.
Wow. Okay. Cool. So you guys are continuing to party out there with Luca. That partnership's going strong. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, love Luca. I got to meet him 2 or 3 weeks ago when we did our team offsite in Miami. So he came by the house one day. He came to the meetup. Really cool guy. Him and Frank are just best buds. I think they sync on a lot of levels. The way they think about a lot of this stuff is very similar. And then, I mean, just from a brand perspective, how can you not love the Pudgies? You know what I mean? Like they're so cute. And like, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of synergies as far as the brand is concerned with like Pudgy Penguins and Utes. And then obviously, we got to throw DGods in there for the culture, but no, super pumped for everything we're doing with Pudgies right now. And, I'm sure we'll continue doing really fun things into the future.
Yo, that's really rad. Like, and again, I know we'll talk like DGods, Utes, we're going to talk all that, but like, this is one of those moments that we want to make sure that like right now you're the focus. Because here's the thing, like we know that, everybody hears Frank, we were fortunate enough to talk to Kevin a while back, but, I don't want to slight what you bring to the table and what you have brought to the table already. So like that, we want to make sure we're focusing on you. We'll talk the fun stuff afterwards, but like, I'm curious, right? And I know we chopped it up a little bit yesterday as we were prepping everything, but like, I'm always curious about the beginning. Where did things start for you? You said you're in Oklahoma. Like, let's start somewhere in your childhood, something you remember kind of like, where does Aaron come from? What's your story, dude?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I grew up pretty close to Oklahoma. So I grew up in Dallas, Texas. It's like a 3-hour drive. So it's really not that far. And I just ended up in Oklahoma because I went to college here. But I mean, early years, I was like, the class clown. I was kind of a little rambunctious back in the day.
No.
Got into a little bit of trouble here and there. But had fun, and it was anything too bad. And then, yeah, first job in high school, I was a lifeguard. So I was a lifeguard at a gym called Lifetime Fitness. It's kind of like a club style gym. I loved that job. I was teaching swim lessons, coaching a swim team, all that good stuff. And then I went to school in Oklahoma at OU in Norman, studied entrepreneurship and accounting. So I was a double major there. And then when I graduated, I just kind of decided I was going to try my hand at startups. And so I had my own startup for, I guess, 3.5 years almost, worked on that for a while. And then towards the end of that journey is when I found like Web3 and crypto and started getting super involved in the ecosystem. So I've always just been down to work on fun things. And I've always like found joy in everywhere that I worked, even if it was as boring as, being a lifeguard at a gym.
You told us in some spaces some pretty funny stories about when you were working at that pool. We don't have to go into it here on the episode if you don't want to, although that would be hilarious. But when you were freshly graduated, what were some of the startups that got you excited? Like, how did that turn into your passion?
Yeah, no, great question. I don't really know if it was any specific startups. I mean, I was aware of a couple that were fast growing and stuff. Like Stripe was really getting off the ground around the time that I graduated school. That now is, I think, the most valuable private company in the world. So they're doing pretty well. But I think for me, really, what it was is I always just had this fascination with like creating things, not necessarily like building things with my hand or like writing code or something, but just like creating like things that people like, whether that's like businesses, brands, experiences, anything like that. So I was like always hustling, and so when TV shows started coming out, like Silicon Valley, love Silicon Valley. It's a great show if you haven't watched it. And it really like, I mean, it made it look like a dream, right? I was like, damn, like this could actually be really cool, and really fun. And so I just tried it. And then that's really when I got exposed to more startups and like more startup founders. Cause I think for the first, 9 to 12 months, didn't really know what I was doing. Didn't really have any friends that were in startups, but then just started to meet those people, started to make those friends and found out about all the cool stuff that, these bozos around town are doing and people across the country. And that's really when I kind of dove into the startup ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, Silicon Valley, that show, you've had kind of a similar experience when you got to go stay in the D house, living in that incubator house, just kind of slamming away with, I mean, you didn't live there permanently with the rest of the team, but I mean, you got to get up and up close and personal with that type of experience. So you you kind of got to live the dream there for a little bit. I don't know, Coach.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much we can go because here's the other interesting thing is like when we were talking, I love how you're like, yeah, in like 2 minutes, here's my life story that takes me to here. So there's a lot that we have to unpack, and I have a startup question, and then Gogo, you can kind of keep going with. But like, so you said the startup in Silicon Valley, but like, did you pick up and move to do that, or were you doing all this from Oklahoma and trying to immerse yourself in the startup space? Because I'd imagine that's a very different environment to try to do it from.
Yeah, no, great question. I didn't move. I stayed in Oklahoma. That's why I'm still here. For a couple of reasons. I think the most obvious is that it's a lot cheaper to live in Oklahoma than it is in San Francisco. So that helps. But also, I mean, I graduated school in May of 2019. So, towards the end of 2019, that's when COVID hit. So really when I was like starting to get spun up on like all this different stuff and like learning about, startups and meeting people, it had gone largely remote. And so most people went from, fundraising in person to fundraising on Zoom, and, deals were being done on Zoom and all this stuff. And so COVID really kind of allowed me to take a more remote startup approach because it kind of forced everybody in the world to just be okay with video chats as a form of business, which I think that's honestly the big reason why, is because I didn't have to move. And then, I met a couple co-founders locally here in the area. They both lived here when I was here, when we were doing this. So it just kind of made sense to stick around. But no, I would chalk it all up to kind of the remote work revolution that was brought on by COVID.
Yeah, man. I think it turned everybody's life around. The fact that we found out we could be so productive from remote positions. Man, I found out that I could work from wherever, and it enabled me to just get more active on social media. That's how I discovered crypto for myself. So I know the power of that. COVID struck us all like a punch in the gut and really hurt everybody, but it also turned I hate this word really, but the meta of the workforce into just empowering the individual to just kind of do what they really wanted to do, how they wanted to do it, and when and where. So yeah, that's really powerful that you were able to discover that at that point in your lifetime, right when people were graduating and having, hard time finding work because work was being cut, except for in the tech industry, right? Like everyone was going to continue needing jobs as like engineers. Like I was in the IT industry at that time. So that was the one workforce that wasn't being cut. And yeah, it really like turns things around for you in your head when you find out you can really do anything you want from wherever in the globe.
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, I think it opened up a lot of people's eyes to the idea that, one like savage with a laptop can actually change the world. And like, that is just such a cool idea. And I think, had it not been for, what COVID presented as far as the professional and social dynamics changing, we wouldn't have seen as many people go over these kinds of opportunities. Like people wouldn't have gone out and started this stuff. There would be a ton of companies today that just straight up would not be alive had it not been for their founders being forced to adapt to the internet. And I think the interesting thing too is, now I guess COVID's, officially still a thing. People don't really act like it anymore, but it's like business hasn't changed, right? Like I still work completely remotely and most of our team does. And so it's kind of incredible that while the cause may have dissipated to an extent, like the outcome is still the same, and it's kind of holding strong because I think it is like a value add to everybody involved.
Yeah, that's really interesting because, again, and I used to work for Adidas prior to this in a sports marketing manager role, partnership manager role. And towards the tail end of COVID, what was interesting is there was a return to office, and it was a mandatory return to office because we had a new building, we had all that stuff. So it's different subsets in different industries, I think, operated differently whenever they were coming out of COVID. So I love the fact that this has provided this opportunity for you. And I know that we're going to we'll pinball all over the place. But one thing, since we are kind of talking COVID and that kind of stuff, I think one of the things that came up during COVID a lot was, like conversations around mental health. And we can talk about it a little bit more. But I think that there's the pros to remote work. And then there's also the cons, that can lead themselves into isolation and things like that. And I'm curious, how do you deal with like your team not being around you on a daily basis, and then kind of the human interaction, the social interaction, and then kind of being able to collaborate as a team?
Yeah. It's not as big of an issue for me now, I think, because, I spend so much of my time communicating with people through various, online methods, Twitter, Telegram, Discord, Slack, you name it, right? Yeah. So I'm pretty used to that. And we as a team, at least right now, we're always talking in chat, in the Slack. And so all day, every day, I've got 3 or 4 conversations going in the DMs. We're talking in, a couple channels here. So it does feel very collaborative. But I would compare that to like the early days when I was working on my own startup, when COVID kind of just hit, that was brutal, man. That was because I mean, especially when you're trying to find your footing in the world of startups. I mean, like I said, I didn't have any friends. I didn't know anybody that was doing anything like I was doing. And so for several months, especially towards the beginning, really until I met my first like co-founder, I felt very alone. Like it was scary. It was stressful. I felt like I had maybe made a bad decision, right? And then on top of that, COVID hits and the world shuts down. And so now it's like instead of like this isolation being a result of the work you chose, you're also being forced into isolation.
Yeah.
So that was tough. I think what really got me through that mentally was just, I mean, I still had and I still do have, a bunch of friends from college, and some of them still lived in the area. We would go hang out or, play some video games or something at night. And just like the little things. And I think kind of how I deal with like working remote, because there ain't nobody in Oklahoma that's in crypto right now. So I can't even really go to like meetups and stuff, but I just like find things that aren't even necessarily related to like crypto to just like have fun with, whether that's like learning new stuff, super interested in like GPT technology and like all the stuff that you can do with open AI coming out. So it's like, learning new skills and stuff on the weekends, or watching a documentary about 70 years ago or something like that. That's kind of how I would usually cope with that stress. But now, I mean, I'm blessed to be working with a team that's just like we're all just we all love each other. I mean, we're all friends at the end of the day, and that's I think what I found really surprising when I got to LA when I first got there is. So I was like, damn, like I don't know what to expect. I had met a couple of them in New York last year, but I didn't really have like relationships with any of them. But I got there and everybody was so friendly, and like I felt like I walked into that house and I had immediately like 10 more best friends, and it felt the same way. I mean, for 4 months we had our ups and downs, and there was a lot of stress throughout the way, but at the end of the day, it's just we're all like friends with each other. We want to talk to each other. We want to be friends. And so it comes like very naturally, I think, for us to just interact on and offline.
That's great. I mean, I think those IRL meetups that you're mentioning are so important. We talk about that a lot on spaces like you and I have. A lot of people will mention that that's really important, and it's really uh, you know fortunate that even though COVID is still an active thing that we're struggling with, that it's died down enough that we can actually have these hangouts. Because you know, I haven't yet hung out with you at an event yet, but I look forward to it. I've interacted so much with so many important people that I've met in the space, but like for me, the social audio aspect has kept me going and feeling like I'm less isolated. Do you feel like Twitter Spaces really helped you, and like these calls helped you feel like you were more part of the team, like hanging on in between before you got to really meet up with them face to face? Like, has that kept you going? Like when you were talking about your own startup and it was just you and then finally one other co-founder before you found like this team of like a huge number of people, right? Um, do you feel like being active on social media has like made a difference where you could actually hear other people's voices, see them on Zoom calls or Discord calls? Like, has that really like, made a difference for you mentally, emotionally, to feel like you have a connection, even though you're far away in Oklahoma? Because for me,
Yeah.
it's a big deal.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely it does. I think, especially when I think back to like before I went to LA and I was like truly a part of like the main team. I was more so just interacting with the community. I was like a mod in Discord and stuff, and we had some Telegram chats with the guys, but I wasn't really doing anything like for the project, really. But what I was doing was just like being a big part of the community on Twitter Spaces. And I do think Twitter Spaces and social audio as a whole, it's a much richer way to connect with people than just text. right? Because there's so many people on Twitter that I'll interact with or reply to their tweets, or they'll reply to my tweets, but it's like I don't feel like I know them. You know what I mean? Like even the people that constantly reply to my tweets and stuff, it's like I still feel like I don't know anything about you. I just know that there's this picture, and sometimes you reply to my tweets. Whereas on Twitter Spaces, it's like you like truly get to understand the people that are behind these things. And I don't think that's just because it's audio based. I think it's because it's like long form content, right? Like you can listen to someone rant for 10 minutes and like that'll tell you a lot about that person, right? Whereas if they type that out, it's like, who's reading all that, right? So I do think the channel of communication is very important because people are more likely to listen than they are to read. But I do think like the richness of those interactions is now, I mean, I don't think people undervalue it now. I think people pretty much understand that like that type of thing is super important, especially if you're building in this space. But months ago, it's like there were so many people that just hated it and like didn't see the value in it and didn't see any of that. But no, I think it's been extremely helpful. And I mean, had it not been for Twitter Spaces, realistically, I mean, I may not be here where I am in this position, right? Because like a big part of why I got involved with DGods and Utes was because I kind of carved out this spot for myself as like a community lead. And I just like put myself in the position to be able to like get there. So I do think it's extremely valuable for literally every single person in the ecosystem, whether you're like a DGen consumer or a project founder. Like there's value to get for everybody.
Yeah, it's interesting when like when you talk to people outside of Web3, crypto, Twitter, outside of Twitter space. Like again, my neighborhood, like I've met some of the dads and whatnot, and they're like, "Well, what do you do?" And I'm like, "Da da da da," and I host some Twitter spaces, and they look at you like, "You wait, what?" Like, and I love the fact that you said that this is what essentially opened up doors for you. And again, this is where like Gogo and I connected. It was in a Twitter space. It was a Web3 job fair. And it's one of those that like, I think that this is a medium, right? Whether it be Twitter spaces, audio, again, we're recording this. This is one of the reasons why when we record, we want to be face-to-face as much as possible. Because again, you get to know the person. It's the interaction. It's being able to hear the inflection of the voice, being able to see and look at you and watch your reaction to me asking you a question. And I think that a lot of that went by the wayside, or people haven't fully embraced it. So I guess with that said, do you have, and I'm going to go kind of off topic and we'll come back around to you, but like, do you have any advice to anybody that's consuming this when it comes to Twitter spaces and how to kind of develop a presence, make a name for themselves, and kind of show up authentically?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I actually talk to project founders about this pretty frequently, especially like the ones we work with at Dust Labs. Because like everybody knows that like Twitter Spaces is a necessity, but it's kind of tough to navigate that sometimes. And what I always tell them is especially from like a project perspective, it's like you don't need to be joining Twitter Spaces from your project account. Like join from like your account and like humanize yourself to the audience. Like show them that like you know what you're talking about and like you're excited and you have passion and you're friendly and like you're a good person. And like that trickles down into interest in whatever you're doing. And then, on the other side for the typical DGen, right? I think like a lot of people have a lot of opinions. And I think the thing that stops people from like hopping up onto like a random Twitter space for the first time is they maybe feel like they'll be like judged for their opinion or that like their opinion doesn't matter. But I think at the end of the day, it's like everybody on these Twitter spaces is there for the whole same purpose. It's for those every couple of times when you hop in a Twitter space and you meet someone new who's like dope. And like, that's what it's all about. And so I think what I would say to anybody that's like, thinking about getting more involved in social audio and kind of the community across communities and across chains, I'd say just like do it. Just like do it, like jump out, like jump off, like give it a go. It's not as scary as speaking in front of like 100 real people in my mind. Right. And so it's like, if you're going to start anywhere, might as well start on Twitter where nobody knows your name and you use a cartoon profile picture. And like, if it goes bad, like what's the worst that can happen? Like you just make a new account, you just delete that person from the face of the earth. I just think people they're very quick to give in to like their anxiety and their fears. But it's like when you do that and like you actually like face those things and like get out of your comfort zone a little bit, that's when the real fun starts happening, and that's when the doors start opening, and that's when the connections really start being made.
Yeah, I mean, so I host a regular, like weekly space where it's all about art, poetry, and music. Can't tell you the number of times I've had people come up and say this is their first time sharing anything, like speaking at all, and then also sharing some art, some poetry, and the sense of accomplishment that they say that they feel after they finally get past that threshold of fear, then they can go out into other spaces and start talking and feeling comfortable. And it's just, there's so much that you can do once you get past that point, and then you start making connections of all kinds and start learning. Like Twitter, it sounds crazy, but you can learn so many new topics, learn so many new trades in Twitter. It's in Twitter spaces. It's crazy because so many knowledgeable people are putting out content. And sure, you have to sift between, is this a thread that's really, posting factual content versus opinion? Do I need to do my own research? But you can really start to judge for yourself and then do more research behind that. And then, feel confident enough to go talk in more spaces and say, I've formed my own opinion based on my own research here. And one of the things that I've always admired about you, Aaron, is that you get up on a space and you help disseminate knowledge and content while being so charismatic and funny and entertaining that people are learning but having a freaking blast with you the whole time. And they know, like, you can kick back with you. It's like having a beer with you in a Twitter space, but also like learning new things. So, and that's the way people are going to want to flock into this space, and actually like gain new like knowledge without a lot of friction, is by learning while being entertained and not even realizing that they're learning. And also, just speaking of like getting past your fears, like this is one of the things that we talked about recently, is like you share with us about how you get past your own fears, and that just makes people want to be friends with you even more. Like we talked about you going skydiving, like things like that. When you're afraid of heights, as deathly afraid of heights as you are, like that's just, that makes people want to relate to you even more, because like here's this guy who's like, just, you want to be best friends with, but is also biz dev on one of the most successful teams that we know in the ecosystem. So, who doesn't want to be friends with this guy? Come on. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you for the flowers. Wow, I'm probably blushing on the camera right now.
Just a little bit.
No, I mean, I think I don't know. I feel like it's the beautiful thing to me about meeting people on these Twitter spaces and like meeting people through the internet is like everybody has those stories, right? Like everybody has that one time that they just like conquered their fear, or that one time that they did something so crazy that was so like out of the normal for them. And like everybody has those moments. And what I love is like when you get those moments out of people, right? Is like when they kind of give in to the hive mind that is like this crypto Twitter community. Because like to me, that doesn't just signal like, oh, they're just talking about themselves. It truly signals like they've like assimilated to this community. They're a part of it, right? Like they're no longer this like mask that they wear online. They're now a person. They're a persona. They're an actual individual that has this identity online. And I love it when people share that type of stuff. And I couldn't agree with you more on like the entertainment versus education piece. Cause like we've all been in some spaces where, it's just people are just trying to like shove like information down your throat. And it's like, I can't stay there, and then on the other side, I've been to spaces where it's like, how many brain cells can I lose in the next, 2 minutes? And it's like, if you can find a middle ground there and really tote that line well, then like you can actually make some great spaces. And I'll shout out Leap for this, because I think he does a great job in this in a lot of ways. Is he has these conversations that are very entertaining, and sometimes they can even get heated, but you always walk away with something. And I think that's just like shows you how he's been able to grow himself over these last few months so quickly. Is like, well, it's good content, and like maybe there's something to study about the way he does this versus other people that has made that so successful.
Yep, absolutely. That's why we go to his space every night.
Every night.
Every night. Lose sleep over going to Leap spaces. That's the key.
Man, we'll make sure we clip this, and that way Leap gets his flowers as well. Leap, if you're paying attention, we're throwing you flowers. Embrace this. But I love that, right? Because again, and I think that and don't think that we're bypassing you overcoming your fears, because I'm coming back to that. So, once I kind of tie this together, like I love that, because right, like it also echoes the fact that there's something for everybody out there, particularly, and again, we're talking Twitter spaces, but again, it doesn't matter how you ingest your content, right? There's something for everybody, and you have the opportunity to choose what you decide to ingest and what you try to internalize and take with you. So like, I love that. And we can come back around that, but like, I don't want you thinking you're getting off the hook with what Gogo asked you. And I love the slight deflection there, but I do want to bring up, like, she said, fear of heights and skydiving. And I want to unpack that, because I'm sure it wasn't like, where did that come from? And then let's go to the story about the skydiving. But I want to know where it started.
Yeah. I don't know when it really started. I mean, for as long as I can remember, like skydiving has been on my bucket list, even when I was afraid of heights, right? It was always like that thing. And like, I mean, everybody says it, right? Like, oh, one day, like skydiving, that's the bucket list item. And it was for me too. And so I always just kind of thought one day I was going to do it, but I never really planned to do it. And then the opportunity just kind of presented itself. So I was studying abroad in college with my best friend. And we were there for a couple months, and pretty much every weekend we worked throughout the week. So we had like jobs and some classes, and then every weekend it was just free reign. And so we took that every weekend as an opportunity to just go visit a new country. And one of these weekends was our Switzerland weekend. And we chose a certain city in Switzerland because my friend also wanted to go skydiving. And so we kind of decided while we were there in Europe, we were like, all right, well, we're going to plan a skydiving trip in a couple weeks. So we did a bunch of research, tried to find Google search best skydiving in the world. Like, oh God, like where's the best place? And we found a pretty great spot. It's a city called Interlaken in Switzerland. And it's this, it's like this valley on kind of like a river and a lake that's just covered from like all you can see is just mountains. And so we went there. It's the most beautiful place I've ever been in my life. I've never seen water that blue. I don't even know if I've seen the color blue that blue before. It was magical. And so we went there. We had it like scheduled. Then the weather was really bad for like 2 days. And we were going up in a helicopter too, so not a plane. And so the weather was like a bigger factor. So it was so cloudy, so we couldn't go up one day. So we're like, okay, well, what are we going to do this day? So we went hiking. And I love hiking. I love the outdoors. I was a Boy Scout growing up. Like, I love it. But I hate heights. And, obviously, if you go hiking in the Swiss Alps, you're hiking on a mountain. And so when we kind of got to the end of the hike towards the peak of the mountain, on one side of me was a beautiful meadow. There were cows grazing. You see houses. It was like straight out of a postcard. And then on the other side of me was a different postcard, but that was like a sheer drop, like a cliff that was thousands of feet high straight into the river. And this path was, it was probably like 3 or 4 feet wide. So it's not like it was like a small path, but like it's not that big either, And so when we got there, we were probably about 150, 200 feet from the actual summit. And I looked at my friend. I was like, no, I can't do that. Like, I literally cannot go up there, because I was just looking over the side and I was just like, there's no way. And he tried to convince me for a while. And I like, you know how like when you talk to your friends and you're like trying to convince them to do something, you can tell when they're not going to budge.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I was very clear with them. I was like, dude, look, I get it. Like, I get it. I know you're going to enjoy this. This is going to be beautiful. Take so many pictures for me. But if you want me to go up there, you're going to have to drag me. Like, I'm not going. It's just not happening. And so he was like, all right, whatever. And so he went up to the top without me. And I just like waited there. And it took probably 30, 45 minutes or so because it was, still it was like straight up. A group of hikers came by. I talked to them, hung out with them for a little bit. They were hikers. I think they were from Germany. And it's always funny too, being in Europe as like an American or at least a Texan. It's like, oh, they always ask you where you're from. And I go, Texas, because everybody knows Texas. And then the next question without fail is always, oh, do you have any guns? So like, that's kind of funny that the reputation goes across the world. But no, I sat there and I did like push-ups and stuff to stay warm because it was very cold. And I just like waited for my friend to come back down and he did. And we went back down and finished the hike. So like, I don't budge on the hikes thing. And so then like the next day when the weather was clear, we got to the aircraft hangar, the helicopter hangar in the morning, and it was still pretty cloudy. So we couldn't go up. We just had to wait there for like 2 or 3 hours. But actually that was the best possible thing that could have happened because in that 2 or 3 hours, we spent it hanging out with like the people we were going to go skydiving with. So the guy that was strapped to my back is a beautiful Swiss man named Christian. And I got to talk to Christian for like 3 hours before we went skydiving. I talked to him all about his life. He's got kids. He's got a family. He's jumped like 2,500 times. Like this is his life. And I was like, all right, cool. Like this guy knows what he's doing and he's got a lot more to lose than I do. So I was like, let's do it. And then I got in the helicopter and we just kind of did it. It was the scariest thing I've ever done in my entire life. It was the first time I was ever in a helicopter too. And then I was the last one also that went off the helicopter. So the first one that went was my best friend. He was strapped to another dude. And so he just like, they like kind of walk out the helicopter and then they're gone. And then the next dude was going solo. And so he just like, he was pretty cool. I'm not going to lie. It was pretty cool. He like flipped out of the helicopter and was like, he was gone too. And then it was just me and Christian. And he was like, kind of like waddling a little bit, trying to get us over to the edge. And they tell you basically too, like you have to like go through this training before you go. Like I was laying on the floor, like doing the skydiving thing. They're like, don't do this. Like, don't, mess around with your stuff. I was petrified. I don't remember moving a single muscle in my body. I don't know how helpful I was for Christian, but he basically had to like jump out with me. And I think I tweeted the video a couple weeks ago, but for the first, like, I want to say like 10, 15 seconds, sheer terror. Like I thought I was like dead. And I truly like, I remember this thought very vividly too. Cause like I'm so afraid of heights. Like literally what I had just done was the scariest thing I could ever imagine. And I straight up just came to terms with the fact that I was dead. Like I was like falling for these like 10, 15 seconds. And I was just like I had the thought, I was like, well, there's no going back. Like, it's not like I can get back in the helicopter. So I was like, this is it, right? Like either I survive and it's sick or I die and it's kind of also sick. And so that's kind of when I was able to like really let go and enjoy it. But it was just sheer adrenaline. And I have never been happier, I think, in my life, like in a single moment than when we landed. Like when we hit the ground and like I was touching ground again, like I felt like a gladiator champion. You know what I mean? Like I felt like I had just like done the craziest thing in the world. Like I was just on top. I felt like I was invincible, and it was so worth it for that feeling. But I probably won't do it again just because it's like if the time I went skydiving is in objectively one of the most beautiful places in the world, right? Like I'm in the Swiss Alps. It's like, where the hell else am I going to go skydiving that's not going to be worse? You know? So I'm like, I feel like, if I had to pick one place to go skydiving, picked a good spot, maybe one of the best spots, I have no need to ever do it again. And yeah, no one could ever take it away from me, which is like the other cool part, because I can go around and tell people that I am so afraid of heights. It is the worst thing in the world for me. But one time I jumped out of a helicopter. And like that's kind of cool. So yeah, that's how I faced the fear of heights most recently.
Wow. I mean, I heard the story on Spaces and I've seen the video, but man, I just relived it with you. And
Me
yeah,
too, honestly. Like my heart's beating right now. I'm not even kidding. Like
I feel the adrenaline right now because you just walked us through that whole thing. The first 15 seconds, you were just accepting death. That's a feeling. I mean, I can't even imagine, you know. I've only I mean, I've told you this before. I've only done indoor skydiving. Itty bitty bitty baby
mhm.
teeny indoor skydiving. I took my 70-year-old mother indoor skydiving for her birthday. It's nothing. I mean, wow. I mean, the fact
Yeah.
that you were so deathly afraid of this thing and you just jumped. I'm I'm amazed.
This
I'm
is why
I'm
not,
amazed.
I mean, let's be clear. It sounds like he didn't jump. It sounds like he was probably
I
Christian
was
stepped off.
more so perched. Yeah. Shout out to Christian.
He was poofed by Christian.
Yeah.
Poofed.
Wow.
But
It's crazy too, because I mean, what it really did too is because in those couple seconds where like I basically decided that this was it, and like it sounds like a joke, but like I promise you it wasn't. Like I thought it was like I was like I'm done, but it gave me this perspective of like really like truly realizing just how small I was. You know what I mean? Like I'm literally falling from the sky, surrounded by mountains and like gigantic lakes. I can't even see the houses on the ground. And the fact that I think the free fall was like probably like a minute, over minute and a half. And so it's like you really truly feel just how small you are in this world, and like on like a very like deep sappy level, like it kind of gives you some perspective of just like damn, like maybe some of this small stuff doesn't really matter. Like if it's small to me, imagine how small it is to the rest of the world.
Yo, like here, and let me. I'm going to ask you because again, I love that perspective, and again, like Gogo and I talk about a whole bunch of different stuff in all of our conversations, but like that perspective is powerful. But my question for you is like, how do you do? Well, let me rephrase. Do you come back to that often? And if so, how do you use that as a grounding moment? Because again, what you just said is great, and it's a great soundbite. But I want to know, like, do you actually apply that? And then, if so, how?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I actively apply that, like, thinking about that moment and like applying that to things in real time. I think it's just more so like, I mean, the whole my whole experience in Europe really like shifted a lot of my perspective and like the way I thought about a lot of things. And so really it's just kind of one of those like Lego pieces that forms, the base of the structure of what's happening. And so it's much more like kind of autonomous and inherent now. But I mean, in the time, it was definitely like I didn't forget about that moment for probably. I thought about it very frequently for months, even over a year or two, maybe afterwards. Because it's like I especially with the startup, right? It's like I would be so stressed, and I would feel like the world is just like crumbling, and that nothing I did like did anything. And then I would just like kind of remember, I was just like, but like I've had all these experiences in my life that have been amazing in their own right and are completely independent of what's happening right now. And I think like that to me was like the important part, was really kind of finding comfort in the idea that like if what I was doing right now didn't work out or wasn't working out, it's like, well, look at all these other examples of stuff that has been, a great moment in my life that I can, go do again in some form. Like, oh, I could go travel. I could become a skydiving instructor if I wanted to, no chance. But it's like it really kind of opens your eyes to the fact that, like, I mean, like we went to Interlaken, Switzerland just to skydive. And it's like, well, you think the people that live in that city care about my startup that I'm working on in Oklahoma? No, they got other problems of their own that I probably don't care about either. And it really just like helps ground me and make me think that, bad days are bad days, but like bad days aren't bad years. And you can just like truck through it and kind of keep grounded to the fun things in life.
And you mentioned to us previously that like a lot of the time that you spent in Europe was really important for you when you were studying abroad and really helped and you just mentioned again that it set a foundation for you to just like have a really good basis moving forward. Tell us more about how studying abroad there, like where did you go? What did that do for you to fuel you, moving forward?
Yeah. Gosh, where to start? It was the best summer of my life. I mean, so I studied abroad with a school program, and I had an internship while I was there, and then I also took 2 classes. So me and my best friend went together. We lived in Prague in the Czech Republic. Beautiful city, love that city. And we had like a pretty authentic experience. Like we had an apartment, we did like our own grocery shopping and stuff. We had like a school that we would go to some days for class. We had offices with real companies that we would go work for during the week, and then we just like travel on our own. So it was a very like independent experience. But I've always been a pretty independent person. Even when I was young, like I would go to summer camp for like a month long when I was like 10 years old. And my mom hated it, but I was like, I'm out. Like, let's go. So I always like kind of loved that thing. But I think like traveling and just meeting people from all different walks of life was the best part. So you asked where I went. I mean, so we lived in Prague. I went to Interlaken, Switzerland. Went to Amsterdam, Poland. We went to 2 cities in Poland, Warsaw and Krakow. Went to Berlin in Germany. We went to Budapest in Hungary. I'm probably forgetting 1 or 2, but we traveled a lot, right? So it was incredible, and I think kind of how that like changed my perspective on things was really. I mean, I grew up in a bubble, I grew up in the suburbs of Dallas. Like my family wasn't super rich or anything, but they were doing all right. So I never really had to like struggle for a lot of things. I worked because I wanted to work. I didn't work because I had to work. And I met a lot of people in Europe that hadn't been exposed to like American culture or the same kind of opportunities I was exposed to as just like being a kid in Texas.
Mhm.
And so like learning about kind of how people go through life in other places in the world, right? I mean, I'm thinking about starting a tech startup. This guy's just thinking about paying his bills for the rest of the month. And like his job's in the tourism industry because he lives in a city like Prague, and it's like my job is remote because no one wants to go to Oklahoma City. And so it's like all these little things kind of compound and like gave me a much better picture of like what is it like, what is like the human state, you know what I mean? Like we're all like members of different social groups, whether they're like nationalities, religious countries, whatever. It's like all these different things you can kind of identify as, but really like when you strip all of that away, it's like it's just a bunch of people with like a bunch of different dreams, a bunch of different goals, a bunch of different struggles. And it really kind of just like made me very thankful, number one, for a lot of the opportunities that I had up to that point. But also just like opened my eyes to like the possibility that, I mean, before I studied abroad, I never even considered living outside the United States.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like I always just thought, oh, like I was born in the US. I'm staying here. I'm an American. And it's like, yeah, cool. But there's actually just so much incredible opportunities, cultures, people, places outside the US, maybe even more so that are inside the US, that it's like it's not that different, right? And like you have these preconceived notions of like what different cultures will be like or what different places will be like, and then you get there and you're like, oh, these are just the same people, they just speak a different language. And I think that really opened my eyes to where now it's like one day I do hope to live for an extended period of time outside the States. I don't know exactly where. I got a few cities in mind, but it's just like the idea that, I mean, especially working remote, right, in tech, it's like, why not? Why not? Why wouldn't I go live in Prague for a year? I love Prague, right? I don't speak any Czech. So that was, I have so many stories about the language barriers because that was brutal. But yeah, I think it just gave me a very deep appreciation for like other people in different cultures and the idea that like who cares like where you live or like where you're born. It's all about like where do you go and what do you learn.
Before we go on to everything that you have learned and how you applied it to the startup, I do want to hear a story about the language barriers. Go ahead and give us one.
Oh, dude, the worst one was so I had an internship, which my internship was really cool. I have you seen the movie War Dogs?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had an internship with basically that company. It was it was a defense like arms supplier. So yeah, that was pretty fun. But because it was like that kind of a role, I like had to wear like business casual. I like dressed in like, you know, collared shirt, slacks. And so I think I got my dry cleaning done 2 or 3 times while I was in Prague. And that was just the worst experience. Because I mean, you know, sometimes you even go to dry cleaners here and it's tough, right? And so I went to a dry cleaner in the mall near our apartment in Prague, and they didn't have any English on their signage. Some of them they you know have descriptions and stuff in English. This one, nothing. And the lady that was working there, not a lick of English. She had no idea what I was saying. I had no idea what she was saying. And so I talked to her or tried to talk to her for a couple minutes. And I like had all my clothes and I was like, I just need these cleaned, like da da da. And like she could tell. She was like, this guy just fucking, he's not gonna get it, right? Right. I was being a bozo. I was just like that typical American bozo that's coming here to get his dry cleaning done. And so eventually she just like took my clothes, said a bunch of things, pointed to a couple things on the sign that I, again, no idea what she's saying or talking about. And then I was like, yeah. And I just like kept nodding my head. She took my clothes and then gave me a ticket that had a date on it. And that's the only actual data point that I got from that entire transaction. So I had a date, and then I just came back on that date and put my ticket into like this little machine on the wall, and it brought me my clothes, and they were very starched but clean. And so I don't know exactly which dry cleaning package I purchased, but it worked, and it was very stressful. But then the next 2 times that I went, she knew me. And so it was easy. She just like saw me. She's like, oh, okay.
You built that rapport. Here's the bozo.
Yeah. So it was a lot of experiences like that. Like nothing too crazy, but like definitely some funny little stories.
Wow. So, I mean, that internship had to have been really interesting. Working for that company in particular, was that arranged? I assume that was arranged through your university, but like how long were you with them and what was that like? And how did that play into what you, took into your own startup? I imagine that played a role in how you thought about business.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was arranged through the school. They had like this program where they would try to like match you with a company that you would like. And when I was talking to the person that would do the matching, she's like, you know, what do you like to do? And I was like, I don't know, like I'm entrepreneurial. I like to like, you know, create things and like plan stuff out and like do stuff like that. And she's like, oh, okay, I don't know.
I'm from Texas. I like guns.
Yeah, there you go. that might have worked. But yeah. And then so she came back like a week later and she's like, okay, like I have a couple in mind. I think one might be a really good fit. So how about I set up a call? And so I talked to the founder, and he was a really nice guy. And like it was pitched to me as like basically like an industrial holding company, because that's what it was. It was like an umbrella corp that did a lot of crazy stuff. One of those things being like defense and arms. And so I was like, yeah, let's do it. Because he basically was like, you know, you're gonna work on a few projects, maybe help plan some business models, and like help us launch a few things. Cool, let's do it. And so then I got there, and I mean, when I say they did everything, like they had consumer candy brands that they did distribution and fulfillment for. They had industrial like lubricant for machining and factories, and then they sold tanks. And so it's like it was kind of wild, but I very quickly figured it out because when I walked into the office, there was like a gigantic mortar shell sitting in a bookcase, and I was like, "That's not normal.
That's not candy."
Yeah, that's not what I've come in contact with. And then through talking to the guys there, they have a lot of great stories, but the two founders both drove bright red Ferraris. And so they always had them like parked in front of the office, and you don't really see cars like that too often in Prague. And so I knew like these guys were doing some cool stuff. And basically what I was tasked with that whole summer is I did a lot of research on different nations as far as like their current military capabilities and like where they were lacking and like what we could sell them. I made a pamphlet for like an arms expo that was in France for a bunch of like products and stuff we had. But then on the other side, I planned out and kind of built the foundation for a travel agency that catered to people from India, specifically students coming and studying in the Czech Republic and building lives and stuff. So it was all about like, how do you set them up with the apartment and all that good stuff. So I did that, and I did, defense arms stuff. It was pretty weird, but it was really fun.
Aaron, the travel expert and international arms dealer. Amazing.
Technically, right? Isn't that so funny? Like I guess I technically could put, international arms dealer on my resume. Yes. It wouldn't be lying.
That would look good on LinkedIn. I really think so.
Would look really good on a no-fly list too.
It's a good point.
Yeah. So Europe was great.
I mean, the insight into what we've learned about your experiences is unparalleled, Aaron. This is incredible. So when you eventually really launched your startup, I mean, how did that play into everything that you were doing? What did you focus on with your own business?
Yeah. I started it right after I graduated college. So pretty much just immediately had full focus on the startup, but it was directionless focus because I had no idea what I was doing. And so it was a lot of when your car gets stuck in like the mud or the ice and you're just laying on the gas, but your wheels are just spinning. It was that for a lot of months. And that was not fun. But like I said earlier, I eventually met people, learned things, and figured it out through there. And I would say to me, it was always just about, I had watched the TV shows, right? And technically I had a degree that said I knew how to be an entrepreneur. But what I figured out pretty quick after graduating school was that degree actually was worthless. Doesn't mean anything. And they didn't teach me anything that I really needed to know because who knew the real world works differently than it does in a classroom. And so it was a lot of trial by fire, and I just kind of leaned into it. And I think that was my biggest focus, was basically just, how do I just destroy my ego so that I don't care, so that I'm here to get the feedback. Like somebody could say that, oh, you're wasting your time. This is the dumbest idea I've ever heard of, blah, 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 blah. But it's I don't have an ego. So it's good. Thank you so much for that feedback. Let me fix it so that you like it. And I think that kind of mindset, that was early on, because everybody, when you start a startup, you think it's the next big thing. You're like, oh, this is going to change the world. Well, probably not. But it definitely won't if you don't talk to people about it and you don't take that feedback. So that was my big focus in the beginning, was really just destroying the ego and being able to take all the feedback, negative, positive, and just be a sponge. I was there to learn. I wasn't there really to build a startup. I was there to learn how to build a startup. And then that's, a year after that is really when I would say it actually started. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Like, and again, I think we can get into kind of what you did from the startup, but I don't want to move past the whole detachment of the ego thing, because that to me is huge. And that's something that I don't care who you are, me at age 43, you at age 26, like that's one of the hardest skills to be able to go ahead. And I don't even want to say master, but even just do. So like, where did that come from? How, like, was there somebody that modeled that behavior? Where did you learn that that's what you needed to do to be able to move yourself forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think it wasn't like modeled by anything, or I hadn't like read it in a book or anything. It was more so I just felt it. I felt that, I mean, the conversations I was having with people about what I was trying to build never went anywhere. Like people weren't interested, all that kind of stuff. And so it's like all these external factors kind of lead in to tell you that you're doing something wrong. And it's very difficult to like come to terms with that, I think sometimes. It's like, oh, I'm moving in the wrong direction. But really, it just came from a point of me like zooming out and saying, well, like if this isn't working right now, and if I don't change anything, it's probably not going to start working randomly. So it's like, how long does this go until it's done? And so it was really just like I need to change something, and that something to me was being more open and being more, welcoming of even like rude people that didn't get it, people that didn't even take the time to try to understand it. Doesn't matter, because like if you can't win those people over, you're not going to make a globally scalable technology anyways. And like really just realizing that was the fact that like everybody I was talking to was always some version of my customer. So it's like if those calls aren't going well, there's a reason why, and it's probably my fault.
Understood. Yeah. I mean, usually when you're in any form of business startup or well-established business, like if you're getting feedback where it's either lukewarm or the consumer is pissed off, I mean, those are your more valuable conversations than someone who's coming to you and saying, hey, I had a great experience, www in the chat, right? Because you need the pivotal experience and conversation where someone is saying, listen, I I could care less about I could not care less about what's happening here right now, or this point is frustrating me, because that's where you're going to improve. So I see you like taking that consideration into everything you're doing in the space right now. Like how do you guys implement that in what you're doing, you know, today with the team in D Labs and Dust Labs? Like, how do you guys model that for each other?
Yeah, I mean, like we're definitely no stranger to FUD. So you don't have to look too hard to find some quality feedback,
Mm-hmm.
which is helpful in a lot of ways. I think it is difficult, especially being on the team, like seeing tweets and stuff from people that are like attacking us or spreading misinformation. It's very frustrating. And that's different than like having negative feedback. That's more like malicious. And like that to me is much harder to manage than the feedback itself. So like, for example, if somebody has some negative feedback about one of our products, typically how that exchange will go is like, I'll either reply to their tweet or I'll DM them, try to set up a call and just like learn more about what they don't like about what we're doing so that we can go fix it. But then on the flip side, someone's attacking us or spreading misinformation. It's actually like very difficult for me. And I've had to like practice this very actively to just not engage. Because like, coming from where I am, it's like, I actually have all the information, right? Like when we're on these Twitter spaces and people are like fudding D-Gods or Frank talking about all kinds of wild stuff. It's like, well, I'm the one that actually knows what's happening. And so it's very frustrating when I don't see that like the same things being reflected in the conversations, and when they're malicious. I mean, I get protective of the boys, because it's like every day we work, every day, like it's hard work, and like we're out here trying to do things the right way, and like really just try to focus on doing well for the people that hold our NFTs, because that's the whole damn point. And in a lot of ways, the people that disagree with that the most are the people that don't hold them. And we realize that too. And I think that honestly for us is probably the biggest piece, is that we realize that there's some feedback that's very much so worth listening to. And there's a lot of feedback that frankly just doesn't matter. And I think being able to like categorize, sort, and like silo different levels of feedback for whatever you're doing is very important, especially when you grow to, a brand size similar to where we are with D-Gods and Utes. It's like you're always going to have your haters. Like they'll find something to hate no matter what. So it's like how do you decipher that and pick out some value for it to improve what you're doing? That's kind of the puzzle. And we're getting better every day. We're never going to be perfect, but we try as much as we can to just like take in all the feedback and actually make changes.
That's huge to hear. And again, and I know it was a good transition and segue into kind of what you're up to right now from startup mode into this. And again, if you want to give a quick overview, like kind of role and function within, Dust Labs, D-Gods, Utes, how you tie into all of it. Because then again, this is like, it's obviously a big piece of who you are. And we want to make sure that we kind of shed some light on, the inner workings of all that.
Yeah, absolutely. So officially, I'm the BD lead for Dust Labs. So business development, partnerships, things like that. I do a lot of like operations stuff too. So I'm like super involved in planning out DNYC that's happening in a couple weeks. And then, very, very active on the community side. That's where I came from, right? Like I was just a community member that like, got an opportunity to do more. And so people like to call me like the Frank derivative, someone once told me that I was like Frank if Frank was like slightly tipsy. And so I'm basically like moderately tipsy Frank. And so I think like honestly a big part of what I try to do is just like be in the conversation so that when some ETH space or something is talking about, whatever, it's like, well, D-God should be a part of that conversation. So it's like, what can I do to make sure that I can like carry that slack from the team, because that's our brand. But no, I kind of have my hands in everything except writing code. So, pick a day, pick a hat kind of a thing. Like I'm scrappy and I'm like down to do whatever needs to be done. And like, that's kind of why they hit me up to come to LA, is because like I was down. Like how many people are going to drop everything, fly to LA with a one-way ticket, 3 days later just to grind on an NFT project?
Yeah. You've been a huge resource to everyone in the space because you are there. Like your presence is like just so valuable because you are available. And I think that's what most people in the space see about you, is that you're just ready and available to be there to discuss whatever the case may be. And I know that's just one of many points probably Frank and the rest of the team saw in you, is that you've been there from day one and you're ready to just like speak for the team and like be there in the trenches and just communicate. And your skill at communication is like unmatched because you're there like on the level with the people, not like holding yourself above. And I'm bringing that back to like the way you separate yourself from your ego. It's very apparent. How do you keep that going in a cycle where the market is so volatile, going from like one chain to another? Everything feels probably really uncertain to the people looking onward, but the team itself is probably really certain of their moves. How do you keep that in balance? Like, again, I'm bringing in like mental health. We touched on that towards the beginning of the episode. How do you keep all that in check so that you don't feel off kilter when everyone around is kind of going up and down, up and down, up and down?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's kind of like a game, really. Like communication, especially in Web3, is really like one big game, right? Like the end goal is always to communicate the information, but like you can't win the game on the first day. And I think like that's kind of how I look at communicating with people, especially on spaces, is like there is a lot of uncertainty around the bridge and a lot of uncertainty about what we're going to do next. Like, we get that. And like, it's kind of purposeful because we don't give out all the information because that's no fun. But in reality, in my opinion, people aren't looking for answers. They're not looking for the roadmap. They're not looking for, oh, hey, how does this work? Da, 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 da. They're looking for security in that they want to believe that we know what's going to happen. And they want to believe that like we feel comfortable and secure about what's going on. And I think that's kind of how I try to frame a lot of my communication, especially around like these big unknowns, is like, I'm not going to tell you when the bridge is going to happen. I'm not going to tell you how the process is going to work or what you're going to be able to do once you bridge and all these different things. But I'll tell you how we're thinking about it. And I'll tell you the people that we're working with to make it happen. And I'll tell you about some of the use cases and edge cases that we've already thought of, and then ask for your feedback on how you think it should be, right? And I think communicating in that way, it doesn't really give them an answer, right? They don't come away knowing anything more about any process than they did when they came, but they come away having felt listened to, number one, which is the most important thing, right? Like, people just need to feel heard. And then they need to feel like that their thoughts, their opinions matter or have the potential to make some kind of impact. And so that's kind of where I like to sit, is like, look, I won't give you the alpha, but I'll tell you like kind of how we're going in the direction that we're going in, see what you think about it. And then like, the end result, fast forward a couple weeks, is going to be some sort of combination of what we thought about and what the community's thought about. But if we don't have those conversations and those opportunities to get those ideas and get that feedback from the community, then how the hell would we put it in the platform, So yeah, that's kind of the way I look at it, because I truly think people are just looking to like feel secure in their backs. Like, if you can make them trust you that you know what you're doing, then they really don't care about the rest. And we've been lucky to build a pretty good amount of social equity with our community.
I totally dig that. And again, this is probably about the only time that I can interject, like, and I'll butcher it, but like a Brene Brown quote. You talked about being heard and being seen and like creating that value, right? Like that's what community and that's what relationship and that's what it's all about, right? And through my exploration with you and anybody that knows me, I'm a good vibes maxi. I'm a community maxi. Like, I love being in it with people and doing things that are bigger than ourselves and that are part of just kind of a larger group that are moving things forward. And through our conversation, you've even opened my eyes to kind of how you guys are creating that a little bit more within the DeGods, within the Utes community and that kind of stuff. So like, I think the more that you guys have the ability to talk about community and like being in relationship and sharing some of that externally, I think that goes a long way for people that aren't necessarily a part of the community. So like, I wanted to commend you on that for sharing those pieces. And I want to encourage you to continue to do more of that, to educate others, particularly as the bridge goes on. Because again, I don't envy the position you're in, and I don't know how you deal with it on a day-to-day basis. But again, you have, so far, you handle it with grace. So is there anything else that like stands out, or that, I mean, again, because as you guys are rolling this out, right, you're asking people to trust you, but like, what is there if you had to ask your community like one thing, or give your community one thing, like an ask to them, what would it be?
That's a great question. I mean, I think honestly, I mean, I would tell people just like dream big, like dream bigger. Like, a lot of people have really interesting ideas of the stuff that they want to do with, specifically like clubs and youths and stuff, and making all kinds of businesses based on the brands that we have. But I truly think there's an opportunity here to like spawn multi-million-dollar businesses, from this community. And I think people, a lot of people do treat it and treat the opportunity of kind of being part of the community as this path to like real success and like real business and working in Web3 and stuff. A lot of them don't. And I think like that's what I would encourage the community to do, is like open your eyes to that possibility, because what we're trying to build is we're building it differently than a lot of companies build their companies, right? Like, the whole point of us focusing on the community and focusing on building tools and ways for people to contribute and build cool things is because our whole thinking is that, well, we can do a lot of cool stuff as a team. We can build cool things, we can release cool stuff. But, when you have 400 community members doing the same thing, think of how much bigger everything's going to get. And so I'm excited for the first club that'll like drop their own NFT project or like build their own, portfolio tracking dashboard as a service. And like, there's all these different things that I think people like, there's the energy there, there's the talent there. I think maybe people don't realize that it's possible. So I wish they would just take bigger swings.
Do you think, in my opinion, I think a lot of people are churning up some really great ideas in these clubs. In my opinion, and let me know if you agree with this, Aaron, I think we'll see a lot more action. And do you think we'll see more actionable steps taken towards this once the bridge is complete?
Absolutely. So a lot of the updates to the current platform that we have for like Utes and DGods, we're going to roll out a lot of it post-merge. Just because, especially if it's an on-chain thing, it's like, do we really want to build it twice, Sol and ETH? It's like, probably not. So that is a big reason there. But yeah, there's going to be a lot more support, tooling, and resources for everybody in the community post-bridge, especially to really like take this and run with it. And we're hyper aware of the fact that like, the club's platform right now is just a glorified directory of group chats. But it won't always be that way, right? And I think in some ways, some of these clubs have like, they're almost too good because they want to move so quickly and do such cool things. But it's like, damn, like give us a minute to catch up, So it's like tug of war. But yeah, I think things will get really interesting and pick up post-bridge.
Yeah.
I think that's like, there's so much excitement and we talk bridge and like, I think that's a kind of a good opportunity to, I don't want to say close this chapter, but allow us kind of a segue out from the fact that like, there's a lot more to come. And I think that we've kind of touched a lot on it. We've been fortunate, Gogo and I have been fortunate enough to, we had a conversation with Kevin. Now we've talked to you and Kevin's already offered to come back on and do another one. So, we want to make sure that we kind of do that. Maybe it's post-bridge so that way you guys can talk a little bit about what's going on. And on top of that, maybe we get Frank involved, but like, again, before putting the cart before the horse, like I wanted to make an opportunity to kind of thank you, Aaron. Like, again, you coming on here, sharing, being real, being vulnerable, like that's the stuff. That's why Gogo and I have created this. And I wanted to take an opportunity to thank you. And, and Gogo, I'll kick it over to you to close. But before I kick it to Gogo, can you, if anybody wanted to connect with you, like where's the best places? And we'll link everything in the show notes as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, first, thank you guys too. This has been super fun and I appreciate you guys. But I think the best way to connect with me, Twitter isn't the worst, right? Unless I'm like on a plane and like I miss it. Cause I get a ton of DMs just like all day from like community people. So like you might get buried, but I'm getting better. Telegram is the same as the Twitter @ just Aaron DGods. And then, yeah, those are probably the two best ways.
Okay, perfect. Well, again, thank you so much. You're such a great friend, Aaron. Thank you for joining us today, taking the time. We've enjoyed chatting with you the past couple of days. Again, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we appreciate your time. Again, I'm Gogo. This is Coach. We're here with Aaron Kruger from D Labs and Dust Labs, and we love you guys. Thanks for joining the roadmap. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Roadmap. We're honored to host such fantastic guests every week and help share their stories with a wide audience.
We hope you enjoyed tuning in. And if you did, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channels. You can find us at The Roadmap Show on YouTube and Twitter, and The Roadmap.show on Instagram.
We'll join you again next week for another amazing conversation.
I'm Coach. She's Gogo. Thanks for being a part of our roadmap.